Hello everyone, this is Dr. K. Narayan. We will be starting in a couple of minutes, but in the meantime, if you can hear me, could you type something in the chat box? By the way, if the microphone volume is low, I recommend using headphones. And if you like, you can let us know where you are joining from. Okay, great. We will be starting in about 3 minutes. It's great to see everyone here from different parts of the world. Welcome all. We will get started in about 2 minutes. Again, if it's not loud enough, I would recommend using headphones. I think the issue is on the telecast side rather than my microphone. Again, welcome everyone. I'll take just 1 more minute to give people time. Yes, Christine, can you hear me? By the way, we have not started. We'll start in 1 minute. Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining this workshop. My name is Dr. K. Narayan, and just to give you a very brief background, by background I'm a physicist, but I've also been on different spiritual systems and exploring on my own for a couple of decades now. As part of my research, I have looked into a lot of different spiritual principles which are based on evidence such as reincarnation. And then that's where I started this series. It's called Soul Lessons. Because if we are reincarnating in this reality to learn something, I think it's critical for us to know what exactly did we come here to learn. And this particular workshop is about love and service, which is, I think, a lesson you need to learn before you graduate from this reality. So we'll get started right away. Now, before we begin, This link that you see on YouTube is available for later viewing. So if there is something that you miss, you don't need to worry about taking notes or doing anything else. Just try to focus on the information, and you can always revisit this information later. Second, I would request that you do not post unnecessary comments in the chat because it can become distracting. At the end of this workshop, there is a Q&A session. So I expect this workshop to be done around 1:30, and then we have 30 minutes for questions and answers. And any questions you have, you can ask me in the chat around that time. And lastly, the resources that I discuss here and other recommended resources that I have are all listed on my website. It's called childrenofinfinity.org/resources. So with that, let's get started. I want to spend some time on foundations because this knowledge is needed to properly assimilate the information that I'm going to share today. And the core teaching that I have, and that there are detailed videos if you want to dive into this deeper, is that there is one energy in this entire universe, and that is the source energy. Now, the source energy becomes crystallized as you in order to explore and know itself through free will. This is known as the perspective of non-duality, but this is also the perspective from physics, where everything arises from what's called the zero-point field. Now, even though quantum mechanics is new, this particular notion has been known throughout history to mystics from all traditions. And I think Rumi put it really beautifully when he said, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the ocean in a drop." So you are made up of the same thing that makes up the source. Now, in terms of an incarnation, when we come to this reality, we have a fundamental choice. And that choice is, you can either offer love or you can withhold it. In everything you do, this includes all of your actions and thoughts and all of your interactions with people. You can either offer love or you can withhold it. Even at your job or anything that you do, that's the choice that you have. Having said that, this entire universe is made up of love. So in that sense, love is like light. Just as light is all there is, and the absence of light is just an illusion. If you pick up a rock which does not shine any light, according to physics, it's condensed energy, so it is frozen light. In the same sense, the entire universe, the fundamental energy that makes up this universe, is the energy of love. And you are part of that same energy. So you are love. Even though you may choose to not shine it through you, or you may choose to not perceive it, love is all there is, and you are part of it. And this includes all the facets of love. Some of them are very popular in our tradition. Many of them are not. But it's all from the same source. So what I mean by that is, the notion of love that we know mostly in our culture is in terms of romance, which is love between two people. But then we have other notions of love. This can be love for family or love for entire humanity. We might have love for that expresses itself in impersonal ways, such as love for growth or excellence or learning, or there might be abstract concepts that we love. So we might love creativity, and that means we are devoted to creativity and using our energy to create things. We might have a love for service. We might have a love for beauty. All of these, though they appear to be completely different aspects of love, arise from the same energy, and that is the source energy. Now, the culture that we live in does not understand love in its fullest sense. It has a very limited understanding of love. And that's why, as part of growing in our consciousness, we go on this journey of love that takes us from a very limited understanding to a universal understanding. So when we talk about love, most of the time, that notion is based on judgment. And this conditioning starts from the very beginning when we are children. Because from the childhood, our parents tell us that they will love us if we behave in a certain way. As we grow up and we go to school, there is something that is expected behavior, and there are other things which are not acceptable. Some of you might have gone to a church or a mosque or a temple. And what did you hear there? The preacher tells you that God loves you, but only if you follow certain rules. What if you don't follow the rules? Well, life becomes tough, right? And this judgment spills over and makes our notion of love transactional. That means I love you if you do what I want you to do. If you don't behave the way I want you to behave, then I'm not going to love you. And that is the whole notion of transactional love. It's not love at all if you think about it. It's trading. It's expecting people to behave in a certain way before we can offer love. And then we also have an identity that might be a tribal identity, or it can be an ideological identity that excludes love. You find this very strongly reflected in religions, where if you are part of the same religion, there is a lot of love. But as soon as you are an insider, or if you don't believe in certain teachings, all that love vanishes. And depending on the religion or ideological philosophy, it can turn into outright negation of your worth as a human being. Now, as we go forward in our consciousness and as we evolve, these notions, which are very, very childish and primitive, they evolve. And we embrace a more broader definition of love. And part of that is, number one, it is compassionate. This is the exact opposite of judgment. Judgment says, you have to do this to deserve my love. Compassion says, my love is available to you regardless of what you do, because you are a being, and all beings have to be loved. It also becomes unconditional. So this is not transactional. This is ever present. And then universal. If you look at the masters who have lived on this planet, they are the embodiment of this universal unconditional love. Now, in practical terms, this reflects in our day-to-day life. And that transition is made when we go from feeling love to being love. If you look at love as a feeling, there is a fundamental problem there, and that is feelings can come and go. On the other hand, being love is a state of being. So if you are love, you are love. It's not dependent on the outside conditions. It's not dependent on the weather. It's not dependent on the traffic. It's not dependent on how others treat you. It's who you are. Now, this is obviously not very easy to do, and that you can see by looking around and also looking at our own history as human beings. There are only few masters who have lived on this planet who have lived this teaching. So here are the core practices of love once you start walking on this path. The first is you honor all beings as an expression of the source energy. The same source energy that has crystallized and become you has crystallized and become all other beings. This includes not only human beings, but all beings, including animals, Mother Earth, and so on. Second, as I said, you have compassion for all beings. And lastly, once you understand that we are all connected, that we are part of the same energy, it requires you to live in a conscious manner. You cannot just go on living your life unconsciously and without responsibility and just do whatever you want to do without any regard for consequences for yourself or others. So I want to start with the first lesson, which is self-love. Because your first love relationship is with yourself. If you don't love yourself, obviously you cannot love others, right? Because the love that lacks within you, you will always be seeking to fulfill it from outside of yourself. And that cannot work. If you are not joy yourself, you are just spreading misery around. There are 3 steps to self-love. Number 1 is to know and honor yourself as the source. That requires that we stop limiting ourselves. We might have a tendency to see ourselves as flawed and limiting ourselves that way. A typical thought that we hear from people is, oh, I am just human. Just human? What does that mean? You have the light of the source inside. All the limitations that you place upon yourself become your reality, but that's not how we were designed. Second, honor yourself and your individuality. Now, there's a difference between individuality and personality. Now, your personality is something that's made up, and it can be made up by expectations from your parents or your teachers and so on. But your individuality is the core essence of your being. One way we honor our individuality is by seeking the right preferences and devoting ourselves to things that bring us joy rather than things that do not bring us joy but might be expected of us. So, this requires us to be honest with ourselves. And then honoring ourselves means we are always asking ourselves, is this situation true to my being? If we are in a job or a relationship that does not really serve us, honoring ourselves means that we are willing to let go of that situation and not stick there just because we are too worried about security. Third, trust your own path. Whenever we go on a journey of consciousness, it's always so tempting to look at somebody and say, this is a person who is highly advanced, and I wish I could be that person. And that just negates the point of the incarnation. The reason you incarnated is because your unique experience is a worthwhile contribution that the source is adding to itself. So your path is a valid path, and you should trust your own path. Lastly, value your inner guidance over guidance from external authorities. There will always be people who will claim that they have the exclusive knowledge of truth. And this is how all the world's religions got started. There is a book, or there's a revelation, or there is something where somebody says, this is the truth, and I have the monopoly on truth. And as more and more people gather around that person, it gathers a mass of its own. And pretty soon it becomes a pretty big momentum. But what I'm saying here is, value your own inner guidance. Ask yourself, what do I feel about this situation? What is my spirit telling me here? What should I do? Instead of relying on external teachers. Second, hold a high vision for yourself. If your vision for yourself is to just get by and pay the bills, that's a tragedy. And just because everybody around you has the same vision for themselves is not a justification for that. So if you do not have a higher vision, life is destined to be wasted on the trivial. There are movies to be watched, there is Netflix, there is socializing that you can do. There are so many things you can do which are all trivial things. At the end of the life, you can look back and say, oh my goodness, did I do anything worthwhile? So you have to have a higher vision for yourself that is independent of the reality around you. Because within you lies the power to transform this planet. So why not aim for your highest potential? Now, this highest potential can be in terms of your own creativity. And then it can also be in terms of your contribution. In my mind, they are one and the same. If you commit yourself to be the best artist, or an inventor, or a teacher, or a healer, you are already serving the source in that manner. And last thing is, maintain self-compassion. Having a higher vision for ourselves does not mean that we are beating ourselves constantly over our own imperfections. This is not about being perfect. This is about going on a higher journey. What that means is, you are always trying to become better. You are always trying to expand and become more. It does not mean that you expect to reach this perfection 1 year from now, or 10 years from now, or even within your own lifetime. Lastly, all this theory and philosophy is not really where true change and transformation happens. And that means we move beyond thinking and planning to actually acting. As I said before, the first step here is to prioritize what is important and worthwhile rather than what's convenient and expected of you. If you look at your calendar and look at your day and how that day goes by, ask yourself, how much of my time is devoted every day to what's worthwhile rather than what's trivial? If you are not devoting any time at all, then your life will not contribute much. That's just how physical reality works. So I would say you have to have a minimal amount of time that you are going to devote every day on doing things that matter. And things that matter are things which are either growing you or your own contribution that you are making to the world. So, this requires working with a daily schedule for growth. And I would recommend that the hardest things and the things that you do to grow should be done the first thing in the morning. According to research, your willpower, your focus, and your energy are the highest right after you wake up. So this is the time for you to think about, what can I do right after I wake up? Maybe I can do something as little as for 30 minutes a day that can help me grow towards my potential. The last practice is you can also do whatever you do with love. There's a Zen saying, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. It's not the outer actions in our life that change. It is the inner being that is expressed through these actions that changes. So anything that you do in the physical world can be done as an expression of love. Now it requires bringing a higher level of consciousness to what you do. So even the mundane things, like I talk to people and they say, oh, I am just a teacher. What does that mean, that you are just a teacher? You are molding human beings for future. Isn't that a great responsibility? And if it is, then why not do it with your full being as an expression of love? Now that does require us to recognize that there are situations in which we cannot offer love to the extent that we would really like. As I said before, if you are in a relationship where even after you are offering love, the other person just wants to control and they always keep bringing low level of consciousness to the interaction. What you need to do in that situation is to rearrange your life so that you can maximize the opportunities to offer love. The two most critical aspects here are, number one, what you do for a living, and number two, your most intimate relationships. If what you do for a living does not fulfill you, find something else. Find something that will bring joy to your heart. Don't stay stuck in that situation. Similarly, if you are in a relationship which is not fulfilling, try to see if you can find another relationship. Now, this might go against the normal teachings that are around this planet, but I would say, as I said before, listen to your heart. That's the most important thing. Let's talk about expressing love in relationships. So relationships provide the perfect opportunity to reflect our own level of consciousness. . The problem we have is, of course, there are mass beliefs which are popular on this planet and they don't work. For example, the myth that is very common is the myth of the perfect person. The myth says there's a perfect person out there, and once I meet that person, I will find love. Now, this is a myth because, first of all, this is an impossible burden to put on a human being. There are no people who are perfect. Second thing, it becomes a problem because we start placing the source of love outside of ourselves. And that is very disempowering. The moment we say that unless I find that particular person, I cannot be really loved and I cannot be happy, what does that mean? If I cannot find that person, what do I expect from my life? The answer is I would expect to suffer throughout my life. And that's a very limiting perspective. Next is our culture values things like outer beauty, security, or conformity. Again, these are mass thought forms which have become popular, but they do not serve. Lastly, we might have a tendency to see love as a static thing rather than a journey of growth. When you watch movies, at the end, two people get each other, and that's where the movie ends. But in real life, that's where the true work starts. That's where two people come together and they think about how can we support and help each other. There might be other issues in relationships which can block us. So first one is insecurity. When we are insecure, we have the need to control others, or being right, or being better than everybody else. Have you ever been with somebody who has this very strong need to control or be right? Their presence is suffocating. And in that kind of dynamic, it's very hard to love. The point is not to put blame on other people. The point is to look at yourself and ask yourself, am I bringing my own insecurity in this relationship? And because of that, I'm poisoning this relationship. Second problem is judgment. Judgment causes the lack of true connection. We might judge people for imperfections. We might judge people for their beliefs, or how they act, or their intelligence, or their looks, and so on. And every time we judge others, we block the flow of love. And when we don't have true connection, we cannot have true sharing. So whenever in a relationship you are tempted to judge, ask yourself, why am I judging the other person when I myself am not perfect? So how do you channel love in relationships? Here are a few things. Number one, honor for each being as source itself. Second, as part of being the source, everybody has inherent worth rather than conditional worth. If you are interacting with your children or your loved ones, be love and offer love regardless of what they do. The third thing is compassion rather than judgment. If you are in a relationship, just by virtue of being in relationship with you, they deserve your love. They don't have to do anything. Lastly, good relationships require honesty and open communication, which are which have been rare in our culture. Because again, once again, we are afraid of being judged. And that's why we keep the most intimate ideas to ourselves rather than discussing with our loved ones. But if you really want a strong relationship, get in the habit of discussing your core ideas, beliefs with your loved ones. Okay, I want to devote the next part of this workshop on service, because this is when love transcends personal boundaries and it begins to reach entire humanity. And this is the path of service. In yoga, this is called the path of karma yoga, which means the path of action. And this is one of the highest ways in which the individual self can unite with the higher self being the source. So what is service? Service is an offering of your highest self in love with no expectation of return. Of course, this requires a very high level of consciousness, because most people don't know how to offer themselves in love with nothing in return. The first problem people run into is they say, I don't know if I have anything to offer. And that's a mistake. Because your unique way to serve is as valid as any other. You might think people who exemplify service are people like Mother Teresa. But Mother Teresa was just one individual who was supposed to express love in just one way, and that way has already been explored by her. Your opportunity is to be yourself and serve in a way that only you can serve. Now, your individuality will show you the path of how you can serve. If you look at your own life experience and ask yourself the question, what have I learned in my entire life that I can offer to somebody else and that will help them? There lies your opportunity to serve. And once again, only you can make that specific contribution. Nobody else in the world has the unique expression that you have, and they cannot make that contribution that only you can make. Now, true service requires the right motivation. The motivations that are typically found in service today may not be right motivations. So, one of the core motivations that we find is the motivation for reward. This might be a financial reward. This might be a reward that's given to you when you transcend this plane. So this might be reward for heaven and so on. The moment you start going for reward, your service starts becoming contaminated. Because now you are not really offering service. Now you are trying to trade. And that is a problem. Second thing that people think about is, I am serving because it's my duty. No. Duty is something that's imposed upon you. That is not how service works. Service has to come inside of you, not because there is an external motivation that's affecting you. So when you serve, don't serve because it's your duty or that's because what's expected of you. Serve because it is your own joy to serve in that way. Third is, people may not have immediate reward in their mind, but they may have an agenda. If you look at different ideologies, they have an agenda of expansion. And they might say that they are serving, but if you look deeper, the spirit of service is actually based on an agenda. When you serve others, you should not have any private agenda. You are serving because you want to serve, not because it's a means to a different end. And last thing is, this is the biggest trap, and that is the trap of the ego. You might think, look at me. I am so great that I am serving people. Service is not an opportunity to make your ego even bigger. True service is being a channel for love and joy. Next, service requires the right understanding. So, when you serve, you have to serve with gratitude. This is not, when you are serving, it's not because somebody else does not have what you can offer. And it's not that you are doing them a favor by offering them what you have. That's looking at it completely wrong way. The person who you are serving has given you this opportunity because that person is actually part of the source. And they have an agreement with you. As part of that agreement, they have offered you an opportunity to serve. So, we have to have gratitude in our heart when we have the opportunity to serve. Second, service is not a sacrifice. It is joy. One problem that people have with service is they think that their self is going to be obliterated because service requires them to have no self at all. And that's a wrong notion. Service is not you becoming a doormat. Service is not that you don't have any preferences anymore. That's not service, because then by not honoring yourself, you are going in the opposite direction. True service is a joy. It's a joy that radiates from you and it affects the other person. Lastly, it's not also a power dynamic. So do not try to fix people. This is the one big pitfall that we see in religious doctrines, that they see everybody who is not bought into their particular ideology as flawed. And what they do is they try to fix those people. If you approach service that way, it becomes a power dynamic rather than true service. Okay, now the most important practical consideration that we have is service in a transactional society. So many people really want to serve, but they say, I want to serve, but nobody around me appreciates service. The society that I live in doesn't appreciate service. So what can I do? And in that sense, it's like living your life from the outside in rather than inside out. You have to decide to become the source of love, not a reflection of love. What that means is you have to bring love from within you into the world rather than waiting for the world to become a place of love, and then you will start your service. I think the best example of this comes from this prayer. This has been attributed to Saint Francis of Assisi, though that's not really certain. But what the prayer says is, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. This prayer says that I want to be the joy that spreads from inside of me to the outside world. not the other way around. So if you are planning to offer service, don't limit yourself just because the world around you does not appreciate the service. If you do that, you would be limiting yourself and living the life from outside in. And when there is lack of love, there is the perfect opportunity to be an example of love. The biggest thing you can do is to be an example. Now, as part of free will, people have choice. They can look at you and be affected by the example, or they may not get affected. That's out of your hands. What you can do is just be the example. And lastly, measure your service by purity of intent rather than external markers. There's a great line from the raw material where they say that even if one soul is touched by what they are teaching, all the effort that they put in to teach will be worth it. Now that kind of goes opposite to our very commercial and transactional society where we constantly measure our contribution by external markers. We want to see how many people are liking our message, how many people are liking us on Facebook, and so on. But that's not how service should be offered. Measure it by purity of intent rather than how many people or how much you affect. Okay, we are almost done with the seminar. Here are a few practices. The first one is identify one way to serve. Just one. Look at your own life experience and see what is one way I can serve. Second, start small and start without expectations. You don't have to go on this ambitious mission and set yourself to fail by starting out with something huge. Instead of that, start small. If there is just one person that you can serve, that's a great place to start. If there are just a few who will listen to your message, that is wonderful. Next, put this as a part of your schedule. Can you dedicate at least an hour a week to service? And lastly, commit to working on yourself daily to become a better channel of love. The service you offer is in direct proportion to your own level of consciousness. What that requires us to do is to raise the consciousness that we have and keep working on it till the end of our life. All right, so we are almost done with the seminar. Here are a few announcements. We have 2 future events that are scheduled. The first one is called Non-Duality, the Journey of Oneness. In this workshop, I'll talk about the different ways non-duality has been explored. In the Indian ancient tradition, this has been called Advaita. Then there's a quantum mechanical perspective to it. And then this has also been explored in more details in the modern times using the raw material. And lastly, there is another seminar that's in December that is about beyond suffering. So suffering is a mentally constructed phenomenon. And we will look into how we construct it and then what is the way we can go out of it. Lastly, the resources that I recommend are available on this website. These are books, videos, and so on that you can take a look at. Okay, now, time for questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask it in the chat. By the way, for questions, I would request that you limit it to the material that's covered today. If we have time, then we can take more questions. But for now, let's focus on the material that was covered today. Question: what teaching do you recommend? Books, curriculums, etc. If you go to my website, there is what I call there is a year of conscious living material. The first book that I recommend is a book called Your Soul's Gift. Then there is also material. There's a book called Living with Joy, and there is raw material. Question from Richard: how can I honor the creator within my drug dealer neighbors as their unique way to serve instead of trying to get them arrested by calling Crime Stoppers on them? This is a perfect opportunity. I think this is a great question. If you perceive that somebody is not in alignment with what you think should be the right way to live, the question arises, what do you do as a service of love? And there are different possibilities. Again, you are a being of free will. There are multiple ways you can approach. One is, of course, you can bring your own perspective to them and giving them an opportunity to see what they want to do with your perspective. Now, if they do not honor your perspective, that gives you another opportunity to look at your own motivation and see why you offered what you offered. If you offer something and the other person does not take it and you get offended, that's a strong indication that you were very attached to what you offered. On the other hand, if you offer them something and in your own thinking that's the highest that you have to offer and the person still did not accept it, that is okay. Just as you have free will, they have free will. So honor them regardless of what the outer conditions of their life might be reflecting. Question from Mona. Question: where can I find recording for this video on your site? Actually, this YouTube link is a telecast link. So if you run this same link later, you will see this entire presentation. Question: how to apply service in a world where you have to earn a living? Earning a living should not take your entire energy. So what that means is, let's start with just 1 hour a week where you are focused your 40 hours a week on earning a living, but you dedicate 1 hour on doing something that's entirely out of service with no expectations of return. And see, the universe is a dynamic entity. If you truly offer service, it will offer you a path to serve where there's a high probability that your other needs will be taken care of. Now, I'm not saying that you are suddenly going to become a millionaire serving others. But what I'm saying is, if you look at abundance, abundance is so much more than just money. When you serve, the universe brings abundance to you in return. Now, if it does mean that you still have to do part-time work, there is nothing wrong with it. Do not disparage what you are doing day to day. As I said before, you can still bring love to what you do every day. Question. As a teacher, how is the best way to serve my students? So there are a few dimensions. Number one is work with psychology and try to understand how your students learn. We typically get too caught up in our own method of teaching rather than understanding how students learn best. So this requires taking a path of creativity and experimentation rather than being stuck in that same old pattern of teaching. Second, honor them even when they may not behave the way you expect them to behave. Because if you have that core honor, that kind of reflects subconsciously and they will be more receptive. Question about the distinction between personality and individuality. Could you say more about that? So, when we come into this world, we might gather traits which may come from outside or which may come from inside, and those are parts of our personality. So, for example, we might be good in math, or we might be bad in math. We might be introvert or extrovert, and so on. None of them are true individual traits. Your true individuality is reflected in the way you experience joy. So, the way you experience joy is the core frequency that you have. And as long as you constantly ask yourself the question, am I experiencing joy in this situation? And if I am not, can I do something else that will make me more joyful? You are honoring your individuality. Okay, I've got too many questions. I'll try to answer them. Let's see how far we can get. Can you please say more on the idea of power dynamic of trying to change other and how to overcome that idea? The fundamental problem is the moment you think that others need changing, you are already dishonoring their selves. So, ask yourself, why do I have this need to change others? And if you dig deeper, this may come from your own insecurity or trying to feel good about yourself by making others change and so on. But if you really allow others the full freedom to be themselves, then this need to change goes away. You'll still be dealing with how to live with them in terms of where they are in their own evolution of consciousness. But that need to change them goes away. Question, what daily practice would you recommend to connect with the channel of love? The first practice that I recommend is anything that brings you love, that brings you joy, and practice it for 30 minutes a day. So, whatever brings you joy. It might be dance, it might be creativity, it might be connecting with people, it might be writing, whatever it is that you can do to feel joy, because that's your true connection with the source energy. And once you start doing that, more and more will come to you. Question, please tell us your thoughts on the ability to have unconditional love for all humanity. And romantic love for another. So the idea is that before we incarnate in this reality, we make agreements with others who can be our romantic partners. Now this does not mean that they are going to be perfect. This also does not mean that we are not allowed to love them with the fullness of our heart. But this does mean that we have to understand that we can love a person who is not perfect, and we can give our best to that person even though that person is not perfect. So, in that sense, this is an offering of yourself rather than expecting something else from that other person. There's another question. What practices do you suggest to open one's heart? So the traditional practices are, there are different ways of meditating that are focused on that. There is something called compassion meditation, which is specifically designed to open one's heart. But there are also energetic exercises that you can do to open your heart. How can we truly change our way of engaging family, friends, and coworkers? In my experience, the, the moment you start going on a journey of growth and others around you are not going on that journey, it presents a fundamental choice to you. One is, you can still keep loving people that you are with without needing them to change. But on the other hand, you also find a different community of people who are going with you where you want to go. So again, this all boils down to that single idea of being love, which means you are offering love not because of how others behave, but because of who you are. Question, will all meaningful service always emanate from our life's purpose or individual calling? I would say yes. If the service does not involve your own inner being to the fullest extent, that's not really service. That's an obligation. And not much comes from obligations. Question from James, how do I deal with others' judgments? You can't. Others are free to do what they want, and there is no way to stop them. How do you interpret resistance or annoyance from others when you are serving sincerely? Is this normal? Absolutely. As part of free will, people can behave any way they want. And that's great because that gives you opportunity to look at yourself and ask yourself, how attached am I in my offering? And if you are too attached, that's not really an offering. Question from James. What if I serve at a soup kitchen but I feel bored by it? Isn't it still service regardless of how I feel? So I'll answer it in two ways. Number one is, you can still offer love and do what you are doing with the best of your intent and the best of your consciousness. That being said, nobody has consigned you to live the rest of your life doing the same thing that you are doing today. So, offer love in the best way that you can, but at the same time, commit yourself to growth. And once you grow to a next level, you'll always find something else to do which will align more in harmony with you. Question from Susanna. I was raised without love in the family. I still am struggling to give love to me and others. How will I have more love for myself? That's a great question. I would recommend there is a book. There are a few books that deal with this matter. I think one of them is called Living with Joy with Sanaya Roman. There's another book called Your Soul's Gift. These books are available, or the reference is available on my website. And when you read them, you'll understand that this condition of being raised without love is a perfect challenge that you placed in front of yourself. to overcome things in this incarnation. So don't look at it from the point of judgment. Look at it from the point of opportunity, and that will change your perspective. Question from William: what do you do when others try to take advantage of your goodwill? And the answer is, being loved does not mean being a doormat. So if you are in situations where people are trying to take advantage of you, you should move away from those situations. And at the same time, understand that no true hurt can come to you. They might take away your money, they might take away things, and so on. And these are all mere illusions. Question from Aaron: why were the Brahmins standoffish when I went to a Vaishnavite temple, when a fundamental philosophy in Hinduism is to love everyone because we are all from Brahman? Aaron, as I said before, the current level of religions has fallen a lot from the places where it originated. So, most people who are doing their work as middlemen there, they have no idea of the high consciousness that they are supposed to offer. And since they do not have that high consciousness, what they can offer is just low consciousness. You should not worry about these things. Raising the consciousness of this planet is a huge undertaking. So I would not worry too much about it. Question from Saket: there is no such thing as free will. Wow. I would say that this is a very strong belief. And I would say that you should examine this belief and see why you are attached to it. Question from James. Again, being vague, what do you mean by the best of me? Please be specific. Being the best of you is reaching for your highest potential. Now, what that means is, whatever you are right now, you are capable of becoming a lot more than that. This can be seen, for example, if you take piano, right? Average person cannot even play piano. If you look at a master can play a beautiful piece with such ease that it would seem effortless. Now that potential to be a pianist is in all of us. We might have to devote 5 years or 10 years or whatever. The same is true of your potential. Your potential to be yourself and to serve is huge. You may not have worked on that potential, and that's why it may not reflect in your current state of being. But if you work on it seriously and you think about it, there is so high you can go. Question from James: how do you know that I can be a lot more than that? As I said, If you apply yourself to any endeavor, and I don't care what it is, there is a monumental amount of progress that you can make in just few years. So obviously you are more than that. Now, from a more metaphysical level, the fundamental field that supports this reality, it's called the 0 point energy. And all that field is a field of possibilities. And from that perspective, everything is possibility. Your own understanding is a possibility. The way you live your life is a possibility. And the possibility is endless. Question from Clarence: how do I stop from doubting myself? Again, we are talking about beliefs here. And beliefs are the most fundamental things because they are templates. And just as if you try to build a house and that is based on wrong template, you are going to have a bad house, right? So your belief systems are fundamental creators of your reality. Now, I cannot answer this question in detail, but there is a resource I can recommend to you, and it's called Changing Core Beliefs, and it's by Bashar. If you go to my website, and if you look at resources, you'll find the reference to that audio. That's a 4-hour workshop that Bashar gave. And just listen to it, and you'll have the better understanding. What is next question? Sorry. How can a soldier kill with love? I don't think you are required to kill in any circumstance. So, the need to kill is not a core need. The need to kill is a distortion that has been brought about by low consciousness. Question: how can we truly serve someone with genuine love if by honoring their free will, whilst it negatively impacts them and others, does it not mean our love and service is not fully invested? I think you might be too attached trying to serve somebody who does not need your service. So, one problem that I see frequently is people become too attached in trying to change people that are in their right vicinity instead of trying to find people who would really appreciate their message. What that means is, if you learn something and you try to apply, it's always tempting to apply it to the people who are closest to you. But they may not be the right people who are most receptive to that message. And if it takes you effort to find the right people who would really appreciate your message, that effort is worth it. The website is called childrenofinfinity.org. Let me type it here. Question: can one be depressed and anxious and still love and serve? Absolutely. Your capacity to love is independent of anything that you may perceive about yourself. Because, once again, going back to the core understanding, you are part of the source. And as long as you are in agreement with that statement, you always have something to offer. Dakota, the name of the book is called Your Soul's Gift. Let me type here. I think we are going back to next question. If you are a soldier, not killing is treason, betrayal, and considered a crime. You have to look inside yourself and ask yourself, how do my own understanding and conscience lead me versus what people outside of me expect of me? If you get imprisoned for not killing, the question is that better than committing this transgression against another human being by killing that person? Question: how can we serve others if we have a lack ourselves? I think that's a great question, and that is a typical question that people who want to serve have. And the answer is, there is no such thing as lack. It's just a perspective. Now, it does not mean that you have all the tools right now that are needed to serve, but you don't need that right away. Start on the path. Start with something small, and over a period of time, you will get the tools you need. Question from William: can love be vicious? If it can be vicious, then of course it's not love. We, as human beings, we have tendency to create these dark and strange dramas and call it love, which is unfortunate. Okay, any other questions? We are pretty much out of time. I'll take one or two last questions. Question from Saket: you have a list of choices given by culture that you can choose from and you call it free will. Can you choose something which has never known, unknown, and cannot be chosen? Saket, if you look at scientific progress, that progress happened because we have always found something that was never there before. If you think about it, if there was no free will, there will be no evolution. Yes. Question: are you suggesting that we only serve those who are open to it? Absolutely. Question: is there such a thing as romantic love? Of course there is. But at the same time, let's not get too carried away by trying to expect that there will be a knight in shining armor or somebody like that who will come and completely transform our life. Because the point is not for somebody else to show up and change our life. The point is for ourselves to show up and change our life. Question: how do you try to grow and not punish yourself when you inevitably mess up? Failures and imperfections are a part of life. The problem is not those imperfections. The problem is the attitude of judgment. And when you let go of that judgment, you release that negative charge, and that's growth. Saket, I would highly recommend you read a book called Your Soul's Gift. Many people who are on this program have already read this book, and I think that will give you a better perspective compared to what you have right now. Question from James. I think this is the last question. I find it near impossible to let go of judgment. I am just being honest. Letting go of our conditioning is the most difficult journey that we take as human beings. So it's not easy, but at the same time, it's worthwhile. Again, I would recommend listening to Bashar's program. It's called Changing Core Beliefs. And if you listen to that workshop and apply that, that will help you grow and go to the next level. All right, thanks everyone. Thank you for joining this workshop. By the way, Changing Core Beliefs, if you go to my website, which is called childrenofinfinity.org, there is a section called Resources, and you can find the reference. The link to watch this is the same video that you are watching right now. So if you copy the same link, you can watch it from the beginning. All right, thank you so much.